There is a street in Los Angeles where ghosts walk in broad daylight. Not the kind that haunt old mansions, the kind that haunt memory itself. You can stand on Wilshire Boulevard today, at the corner where the Ambassador Hotel once dominated the skyline, and see nothing. A school complex. Chain-link fences. Traffic moving past without a second glance. But in 1936, this exact spot held 1,000 secrets. Joan Crawford won dance contests here. Frank Sinatra sang under artificial palm trees. 6 Academy Awards ceremonies unfolded in the Fiesta Room. Bing Crosby was discovered crooning at the Coconut Grove. Judy Garland recorded a live album in one take. Barbra Streisand was cast in Funny Girl after a 3-week engagement. All of that, erased. Demolished in 2005. The Ambassador Hotel is not an exception, it is the rule. Los Angeles has systematically destroyed more Golden Age Hollywood landmarks than any other city in America has ever built. The Brown Derby, Pickfair, the Garden of Allah Chasens, the Carthay Circle Theater, Romanoff's, Saros. Gone. Every single one. The city that invented celebrity cannot remember its own past. But here's what most people do not know. A few places survived. Hidden in plain sight, still serving the same martinis, still seating guests in the same red leather booths where Clark Gable once sat. This is the story of what Hollywood destroyed, what still remains, and what that destruction reveals about a city that built its identity on illusion. Because the question is not just historical. The question is, if a city erases its own memory, what does it become? The ceiling was painted midnight blue. Artificial stars sparkled across its surface. Papier, MCH. Palm trees, salvaged from the set of Rudolph Valentino's 1921 film The Sheik, lined the walls. Mechanical monkeys hung from the branches. A waterfall cascaded down the back wall. This was the Coconut Grove. Society columnist Christy Fox called it probably the most beloved public room of all time. She was not exaggerating. The Coconut Grove opened on April 21st, 1921, inside the Ambassador Hotel on Wilshire Boulevard. Within months, it became the center of Hollywood's social universe. The place where deals were made, careers were launched, legends were created. Joan Crawford did not become Joan Crawford at a movie studio. She became Joan Crawford on the Coconut Grove dance floor, winning contest after contest, catching the eye of studio executives who had come to be entertained. Gloria Swanson competed against her. Hollywood studio heads Charlie Chaplin, Jesse Lasky, and Louis B. Mayer served as judges. The club had a policy that would be unthinkable today. No cameras allowed. Celebrities could relax. They could let loose. They could be human. Marion Davies once rode a white horse through the hotel lobby on her way to a costume party at the Grove. Bing Crosby was singing with his band The Rhythm Boys when talent scouts noticed him. Dean Martin got his first movie deal after performing there. Harry Belafonte was hired when no other major club would book him. The Academy Awards were held at the Coconut Grove 5 times. Beginning in 1930, the 12th ceremony, where Gone with the Wind won Best Picture, took place in this room. Famous band leaders were broadcast live on Coast to Coast radio. Guy Lombardo said playing the Grove was practically a guarantee that we could do film work during the day then have the great exposure of the Coast to Coast broadcast in the evening. In 1958, Judy Garland staged her comeback at the Coconut Grove. She recorded a live album, Garland at the Grove, in one single take. The performance was electric. Raw. Unforgettable. But the Grove could not escape what happened upstairs. On June 5, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated in the Ambassador Hotel's kitchen, moments after winning the California Democratic primary. The hotel never recovered. The Coconut Grove closed in 1989. Sammy Davis Jr. had tried to save it in the 1970s, advising on a renovation called the now Grove with shag carpets and disco bowls. It was not enough. The Los Angeles Unified School District purchased the property in 2001. The Los Angeles Conservancy fought for preservation. They proposed adaptive reuse, housing, community services, a school built around the historic structure. Every proposal was rejected. Demolition began in 2005. By 2006, the Ambassador Hotel was gone. The Coconut Grove was gone. The midnight blue ceiling with its artificial stars. The palm trees from Valentino's film. The dance floor where Joan Crawford became a star. All of it. Replaced by the Robert F. Kennedy Community Schools, the most expensive public school construction project in American history. $578 million. The school was named after the man who died in the hotel's kitchen. The building where he died was destroyed to build a school that bears his name. That is Los Angeles. There was a time when being invited to Pickfair meant something equivalent to being summoned to the White House. Life magazine called it a gathering place only slightly less important than the White House, and much more fun. In 1928, Will Rogers said his most important duty as mayor of Beverly Hills was directing people to Mary Pickford's house. Pickfair was not just a mansion, it was the physical embodiment of Hollywood royalty. Douglas Fairbanks bought the 80-acre property in 1919 as a wedding gift for his bride, Mary. They hired architect Wallace Neff to transform a humble hunting lodge into a 25-room Tudor palace. It took 5 years to complete. The mansion featured ceiling frescoes, parquet flooring, wood-paneled halls of fine mahogany and bleached pine, gold leaf, and mirrored decorative niches. Authentic 18th-century French and English period furniture from the Baroness Burdecout's estate in London. Louis XVI pieces from the Countess Rodezno and Lord Leverhulme collections. Anne de Paul. Pickfair was reportedly the first private residence in Los Angeles to include an in-ground swimming pool. Fairbanks and Pickford were famously photographed paddling a canoe in it, but the pool was secondary to the guest list. Charlie Chaplin, who lived next door, was a regular. So were the Duke of Windsor and Duchess of Windsor, Albert Einstein, George Bernard Shaw, Greta Garbo, H.G. Wells, Lord Louis Mountbatten, Amelia Earhart, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Newell Coward, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, Charles Lindbergh, Thomas Edison, the King and Queen of Siam. Douglas Fairbanks was the first Academy president, elected in 1927. Mary Pickford won the second ever Best Actress Oscar, together with Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith. They founded United Artists in 1919. They were not chess stars. They were the architects of the industry itself. But fairy tales end. Fairbanks and Pickford divorced in 1936. He moved out. He died 3 years later. Pickford stayed at Pickfair until her death in 1979, increasingly reclusive, receiving fewer and fewer visitors. Buddy Rogers, her second husband, put the estate up for sale. He later claimed that Pickford's ghost appeared to him and urged him to sell. Los Angeles Lakers owner Jerry Buss bought it for $5.4 million. He made no alterations. Then, in 1988, actress Pia Zadora and her husband Meshulam Riklis purchased Pick. They promised to restore it to its original grandeur. In 1990, they demolished it. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. publicly expressed his regret. Historical conservationists were outraged. Zadora initially blamed termites. She said the house was beyond repair. Years later, on the television show Celebrity Ghost Stories, she changed her explanation. The house was haunted. Zadora said she heard the sound of laughing women, the echoes of parties from decades past. A white apparition terrorized her and her children when her husband traveled for business. If I had a choice, she said, I never would have torn down this old home. I loved this home. It had a history. It had a very important sense about it. And you can deal with termites. And you can deal with plumbing issues. But you can't deal with the supernatural. Today, a Venetian-style palazzo stands on the site. Only the original gates survive. A portion of the living room, a two-bedroom guest wing that once hosted Lord and Lady Mountbatten on their honeymoon, and the kidney-shaped pool where two of the most famous people in the world once paddled a canoe. The ghosts, presumably, have found somewhere else to dance. The swimming pool was shaped like the Black Sea. This was intentional. Russian-born actress Alana Nazimova designed it to resemble her birthplace. She was one of the most famous actresses of the silent film era. Metro Studios paid her $13,000 a week. $3,000 more than Mary Pickford. In 1980, Nazimova purchased a sprawling estate at 8152 Sunset Boulevard. She spent $65,000 remodeling it. She named it the Garden of Allah, a play on her first name. But by the mid-1920s, her screen career was failing. She needed income. Investors convinced her to transform her home into a hotel. 25 Spanish-style bungalows were constructed around the main residence. The opening party on January 9, 1927 lasted 18 hours. John Barrymore and Clara Bow were among the guests. The Garden of Allah became Hollywood's most famous bohemian enclave, and its most notorious. The hotel catered to celebrities who needed privacy. Short-term stays, long-term escapes, places to hide between marriages, between films, between breakdowns. F. Scott Fitzgerald lived there for several months, in 1937-38, during his final, troubled stay in Hollywood. He wrote himself a postcard while in residence. Dear Scott, how are you? Have been meaning to come in and see you. I have some Hollywood plot twists that I know will interest you. Humphrey Bogart was living at the garden when his estranged wife attacked him with a kitchen knife after finding him there with Lauren Bacall. Fellow residents gathered outside to watch the scene. Bacall escaped through the back door. Ernest Hemingway stayed there. So did Orson Welles, Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Ronald Reagan, Sergei Rachmaninoff, Igor Stravinsky. Edgar Clara Bow was notorious for pushing hotel butlers off the diving boards. Writers found the garden particularly appealing. The Screenwriters Guild was nearby. Raymond Chandler, Dorothy Parker, Robert Benchley, Dashiell Hammett. They drank at the pool. They typed in the bungalows. They created some of the most iconic hard-boiled fiction of the 20th century. Kay Thompson wrote her children's book about Eloise while living at the garden. In her original conception, Eloise was a young resident of the Garden of Allah Hotel. Nazimova herself returned to the garden in 1938. After illness cut short her Broadway comeback, she rented Villa 24. She lived there until her death in 1945. By the 1950s, the hotel's popularity was fading. The architecture felt old-fashioned. Stars were buying permanent homes in Beverly Hills. Newer hotels offered competition. The clientele shifted tourists, conmen and prostitutes. In 19, Bart Lytton of Lytton Savings and Loan purchased the property for $755,000. He decided to demolish it. On August 22, 1959, Lytton hosted a farewell party on the grounds. 1,000 people attended. They came dressed as 1920s movie stars. Charlie Chaplin's and Clara Bow was clustered around the pool one last time. In a tribute to the hotel's creator, Nazimova's experimental 1923 silent film Salome was projected on a large poolside screen. Francis X. Bushman attended. He had been at the opening party in 1927. 8 days later, an auction liquidated everything. Silver serving platters, tiki-style soup bowls, furniture fixtures and Sudanese demolition permits were issued on November 2, 1959. Within days, the Garden of Allah was gone. A bank building rose in its place. Brutalist architecture. Then a strip mall. Then another bank. In 2016, a developer announced plans for a mixed-use project designed by Frank Gehry. The old bank was demolished in April 2021. As of today, the site remains an empty lot. It is hard to imagine that this very spot once hosted celebrities, vibrant parties, and provided a secluded retreat from adoring fans. When they bulldozed the Garden of Allah in 1959, they were sloppy, said Tracy Patton of the Allah Nezimova Society. The parking lot is where the pool was. We want to see what else is underneath. Scripts, bottles, or when they start chipping into that, we will be there, waiting. The most famous restaurant of Hollywood's golden age was shaped like a hat. Specifically, a brown derby. The original location opened in 1926 on Wilshire Boulevard, directly across from the Coconut Grove. Wilson Misner was the frontman. Herbert K. Somborn owned the property. Chuck L. Warner provided the financing. The restaurant was small. The acoustics were terrible. Sound bounced off the dome-shaped ceiling from one end to the other. Every conversation could be overheard, but it worked. Wilson Misner sat in booth 50 almost every day. Power players came to be seen. The Brown Derby became synonymous with Hollywood deal. Within 3 years, a second location opened at 1628 North Vine Street in Hollywood. Despite its less distinctive Spanish Mission-style facade, this became the branch that mattered. It was close to the studios. Screenwriters walked over for lunch. Actors dropped in between takes. Producers conducted meetings in the booths. Hundreds of caricatures of movie stars adorned the walls. On any given night, the subjects of those caricatures might be dining beneath them. In 1939, Clark Gable took a break from filming Gone with the Wind to propose to Carole Lombard in one of the booths. The Cobb salad was invented at the Brown Derby. Owner Bob Cobb is credited with throwing together the ingredients one night when he was hungry. By the 1980s, times had changed. The original dome-shaped building on Wilshire had been demolished in 1936 to make way for a hotel expansion. Preservationists convinced developers to save the Derby hat portion. It was placed on the roof of a new shopping center called Brown Derby Plaza. That hat structure still exists today. It sits on the 3rd floor of a building that formerly housed a Korean bar. The Hollywood location at 1628 North Vine Street suffered a different fate. A fire in 1987 destroyed the kitchen. The building deteriorated. Squatters moved in. Gang members broke windows. The 1994 Northridge earthquake delivered the final blow. The city of Los Angeles declared the building unsafe. It became the first structure in Hollywood ordered demolished. It was razed the following month. The Beverly Hills Brown Derby at 9537 Wilshire Boulevard, across from the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, closed in 1982 and was demolished shortly afterward. A shopping development called One Rodeo now occupies the site. The Los Feliz Brown Derby still exists at 4500 Los Feliz Boulevard. The building has been a restaurant since the 1920s, but it has not been a Brown Derby for decades. Today, if you want to see the Brown Derby, you have 2 options. You can visit the Korean Business District and find a weathered derby hat on top of a shopping center. Or you can go to Disneyland. The Hollywood Brown Derby at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Orlando serves as a tribute to the original. The walls are lined with caricatures. The Cobb salad is on the menu. It is a replica of a restaurant that no longer exists, in a theme park designed to evoke a Hollywood that has largely been erased. That is where the Brown Derby lives now. Ronald Reagan proposed to Nancy Davis in booth No. 2. For decades later, he brought former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher there as his guest. Elizabeth Taylor had the chili flown to Rome while filming Cleopatra, and to Oroville, California, during the Klansman. She would not get married without a quart of Chasen's. Chile delivered to her wedding reception. This became a tradition she kept for years. Chasen's was not just a restaurant, it was an institution. Dave Chasen, a working actor who impressed people more with his cooking than his comedy, opened the restaurant in December 1936. His main funders were director Frank Capra and Harold Ross, the founding editor of The New Yorker. It started as a barbecue shack, Chasen's Southern Pit, in a bean field on what is now Beverly Boulevard. Within a few years, it became the most famous celebrity restaurant in Los Angeles. The list of regulars reads like a history of Hollywood itself. Clark Gable, Errol Flynn, W.C. Fields, Cary Grant. Jack Benny, Howard Hughes, Marilyn Monroe, William Powell, Joan Crawford, Alfred Hitchcock, John F. Kennedy, Groucho Marx, Jackie Gleason, James Cagney, Barbara Stanwyck, Alan Ladd, F. Scott Fitzgerald. The restaurant included a sauna and a full-time barber. Chasen's did not accept credit cards. Established customers simply signed for their meals. A bill was mailed later. The signature red booths became as recognizable as any movie set. Many regular customers had booths named in their honor: Frank Sinatra, Alfred Hitchcock, James Stewart, Groucho Marx. The Reagan booth is now on display at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. Architect Paul R. Williams designed the interior, the same Paul R. Williams who redesigned the Cocoanut Grove. For decades, Chasen's was untouchable, but by the 1970s and 1980s, the industry was changing. Wolfgang Puck opened Spago. Michael Roberts pioneered California cuisine. The food at Chasen's was suddenly arterially incorrect. The red booths felt dated. The no credit card policies seemed archaic. In 1987, the Hollywood Reporter surveyed celebrities about their favorite restaurants. The only celebrities to name Chasen's were David Naughton, known as the guy in the Dr. Pepper commercials, and the amazing Kreskin. Old-timers remained loyal. Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, Gregory Peck, Kirk Douglas, George Burns, and Jimmy Stewart dined there shortly before they died. Newer celebrities still came: Jack Nicholson, John Travolta, Mel Gibson, Warren Beatty. Carol Burnett treated guest stars of her variety show to dinner at Chasen's after Friday night tapings for 11 years, but it was not enough. Chasen's closed on April 1st, 1995. 59 years of history ended. Longtime Atridi publicly disdained the competition. The food. Don't get me started on that. I like places with a good bar and good food. These new places, you order food and you get a bunch of flowers on your plate. I like to see food on my plate. I don't want flowers. The original building was eventually torn down. Today, a Bristol Farm supermarket occupies the site. A handful of the original booths remain inside the grocery store, quietly holding the ghosts of 1,000 conversations. You can buy organic produce where Elizabeth Taylor ordered Chile. On the night of December 21st, 1937, the most important premiere in animation history took place at the Carthay Circle Theater. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated feature film. Walt Disney's gamble. Industry insiders called it Disney's folly. They said audiences would never sit through a feature-length cartoon. They said the bright colors would strain viewers' eyes. They said Walt was going to bankrupt himself. Then the lights dimmed. Marlene Dietrich was in the audience. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Shirley Temple, Clark Gable, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, Claudette Colbert, Eddie Lamar, Charlie Chaplin. Walt Disney was so nervous he could not remember the names of all 7 dwarfs when interviewed by radio reporters. Then he heard it. Crying from the audience during the scene where Snow White lies on her marble bier, and then applause. Thunderous. At the happy ending, Walt later said that moment was when he knew he had succeeded. The Carthay Circle Theater opened on May 18, 1926, on San Vicente Boulevard in Los Angeles. Developer J. Harvey McCarthy built it as the centerpiece of his Carthay Center neighborhood development. The name was an anglicized version of his last name. The architecture was Spanish colonial revival. Monsieur, an iconic octagonal bell tower, a neon sign visible 4 miles. Sweeping floodlights that announced every premiere. The auditorium was shaped as a perfect circle, extended vertically into a cylinder, seating 1,150. The premieres became Hollywood sensations. Lines of cars turned off Wilshire onto McCarthy Vista under weaving spotlights. Crowds gathered to glimpse the stars. Romeo and Juliet premiered there in 1936. Gone with the Wind had its West Coast premiere on December 28, 1939. Fantasia debuted in 1940, but the Carthay Circle is one of the only theaters equipped with Disney's experimental Fantasound stereophonic system. Dumbo had its Hollywood premiere there. For decades, the Carthay Circle was where Hollywood unveiled its most important films. But by the 1960s, the roadshow concept was dying. Multi-screen cinemas were rising. Suburbanization was draining the customer base. Film prints were multiplying exponentially. The Carthay Circle was an anachronism. The theater closed permanently on April 24, 1969. After a 23-week run of The Shoes of the Fisherman starring Anthony Quinn, NAFI Corporation demolished it to build their headquarters and main computer operations center. Today, Dolorese's office buildings in the city park occupy the site. The painted fire safety curtain was saved. It was installed at the rear of the stage of the downtown United Artists Theater. When that theater became a church, and later the A's Theater, the curtain was removed and put into storage. No permanent home has been found, but the Carthay Circle lives on in unexpected places. At Disney's Hollywood Studios in Orlando, a smaller-scale replica of the facade serves as the once-upon-a-time gift shop. At Disney California Adventure in Anaheim, a larger replica houses the Carthay Circle restaurant and lounge. The interior features Snow White motifs, a ceiling mural of the forest scene. Photos from the 1937 premiere, an apple-shaped chandelier in the premiere room. You can dine where Walt Disney's dream was vindicated, just not in the building where it actually happened. That building is gone.
Not everything was destroyed. The Musso and Frank Grill opened on September 27, 1919. It is still there at 6667 Hollywood Boulevard. The oldest restaurant in Hollywood, the same high ceilings, the same dark wood paneling, the same red booths, the same red jackets on the waiters and bartenders worn for decades. But in 2019, Musso and Frank became the first restaurant to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Charlie Chaplin was an early regular. He would race his horses down Hollywood Boulevard with Douglas Fairbanks. The loser picked up the tab at Musso's. Chaplin usually won. He would gloat over a plate of roast lamb kidneys, his favorite meal. There is a booth with windows looking outside. The only one. Chaplin sat there specifically so he could watch his horses tied up on the street. It is still called the Charlie Chaplin booth. It is still the most requested booth in the restaurant. Greta Garbo and Gary Cooper had breakfast together, flannel cakes and fresh coffee. Humphrey Bogart drank at the bar with Dashiell Hammett and Lauren Bacall. Marilyn Monroe was seen in the famous back room in the 1950s, flanked by Joe DiMaggio, Elizabeth Taylor, Steve McQueen. The Screenwriters Guild was located across the street. Stanley Rose's Essential Bookstore was right next door. Writers of hard-boiled fiction hung out in the back room of the bookstore, then spent endless hours at the Musso and Frank Bar. Raymond Chandler, James M. Cain, John Fant, Nathaniel West. F. Scott Fitzgerald was known to proofread his novels while sitting in a booth. Charles Bukowski drank at Musso's in a conscious effort to imitate his literary role models. Kevin Starr, the eminent California historian, said a list of writers who frequented Musso, and Frank resembles the list of required reading for a sophomore survey of the mid-20th century American novel. The menu has barely changed since 1919. Welsh rarebit, lobster thermidor. The chicken pot pie, which Gourmet magazine called the quintessence of integrity. In 2008, GQ declared Musso and Frank the best place to have a martini in America. In 2018, the restaurant served 55,272 of them. Modern celebrities still come. Johnny Depp, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Keith Richards, Harrison Ford. They ask for specific waiters by name. We treat locals like celebrities and celebrities like locals, says Mark Echevarria, the restaurant's proprietor and John Mosso's great-grandson. You can sit in the Charlie Chaplin booth today, order flannel cakes, drink a martini, look out at Hollywood Boulevard. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel also survives. Opened on May 15, 1927, financed by Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, Louis B. Mayer, and Sid Groman. The first Academy Awards were held in its Blossom Ballroom on May 16, 1929. 15 minutes, 270 people. Marilyn Monroe lived there for 2 years early in her career, in a cabana overlooking the Tropicana pool. She had her first professional photo shoot on the diving board. Clark Gable and Carole Lombard had their secret affair in the penthouse, $5 a night. Montgomery Clift stayed for 3 months in 1952 during the filming of From Here to Eternity. He practiced his trumpet in room 928. Shirley Temple learned her stair-step dance routine from Bill Bojangles Robinson on the Hotel S Spanish-tiled staircase. The hotel went into decline in the 1950s. Archways were demolished. Painted ceilings were covered in seafoam green. By 1984, occupancy was at 5%. Graffiti covered the walls. Lawn chairs and card tables littered the lobby. The homeless population outnumbered the guests. But the Roosevelt was saved. Radisson Hotels purchased it in 1985. Using original blueprints and historic photographs, they undertook a $35 million restoration. The lobby's coffered ceiling was restored. A 3-tiered fountain was added. Today, the Gable Lombard penthouse is available for guests, 3,200 square feet. Views of the Hollywood Hills and the Hollywood sign. The Marilyn Monroe suite overlooks the pool. Some say the hotel is haunted. Monroe's ghost appears in a full-length mirror that once hung in her cabana. Clift's trumpet echoes in room 928. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, the building itself is a ghost, a surviving fragment of a vanished world.
Stand at the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Crescent Heights today. There's an empty lot. Fenced off, weeds growing through the cracks. This is where the Garden of Allah stood, where F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote postcards to himself, where Humphrey Bogart fled his wife's knife, where a swimming pool shaped like the Black Sea reflected the California sun. Walk a few blocks east. Find Wilshire Boulevard. Stand where the Ambassador Hotel dominated the skyline. You will see a school complex, named after a man who was assassinated in the building that was demolished to build the school. Drive to Beverly Hills. Find Summit Drive. Look for the Venetian palazzo that replaced Pickfair. None of this is ancient history. The Ambassador was demolished in 2005. 20 years ago. Chasen became a supermarket in 1997. 28 years ago. Pickfair was raised in 1990. 35 years ago. These were not distant losses. These were choices made by people. In our lifetime, Los Angeles did not lose these places to fire or earthquake or war. Los Angeles chose to destroy them. The question is, why? The easy answer is economics. Land in Los Angeles is expensive. Old buildings are inefficient. Parking lots generate revenue. Office buildings generate more, but that is not the whole answer. Other cities preserve their history. New York protected Grand Central Terminal. Chicago saved its historic theaters. San Francisco rebuilt after the earthquake. Los Angeles demolished. The illusions created at the Ambassador Hotel and the Brown Derby and Pickfair were not disposable. They shaped American culture. They defined celebrity. They invented modern fame. The people who gathered in those rooms built an industry that now dominates global entertainment. The conversations in those booths shaped the movies you watch today. When you demolish those buildings, you do not just destroy brick and plaster. You destroy context. You destroy continuity. You destroy the ability to stand in a physical space and feel connected to the past. Musso and Frank survives because the family owns the land. The Hollywood Roosevelt survives because someone decided to restore it. These are not accidents. They are choices, and choices reveal values. What does it mean that Los Angeles chose, again and again, to erase its own history? What does it mean that the city that invented celebrity cannot preserve the places where celebrities became legendary? What does it mean that the only surviving Brown Derby is a replica at Disneyland? Perhaps it means that Los Angeles has always been a city of the eternal present. Perhaps it means that in a culture built on reinvention, the past is just another script to be or perhaps it means something darker. Perhaps a city that cannot remember its past cannot imagine its future. The Ambassador Hotel hosted 6 Academy Awards. It witnessed the birth of celebrity culture. It was the scene of a political assassination that changed American history. It is now a school complex. The students there probably do not know what stood on that ground. Why would they? There is no plaque explaining the Coconut Grove. No marker for the midnight blue ceiling with its artificial stars. The ghosts have been evicted, and Los Angeles keeps building.